years. She's still the same age, but I got older.
Thank you, Nathan. I don't think so, but it's good to see you
The
again.
live stream is up. Sergeants, can we start our recordings, please?
PC recording is rolling.
Cloud recording is up.
Good morning, and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing on the Subcommittee on Capital Budget. At this time, would Council staff please turn on their video? Please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. That is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you, Chair. We're ready to begin.
Good morning. I am Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, and this is my debut hearing serving as chair of the Subcommittee on the Capital Budget. I am grateful to the Speaker for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to welcome Council Members Gibson, Adams, and Minority Leader Matteo. Thank you for joining us today. From my time at the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget before I joined the Council, as well as my service as chair of the Committee on Contracts during my first term, I've developed a profound appreciation for any mayoralty's execution, and in this administration, their efficient execution of the city's capital program. And I've witnessed this council's ability to strengthen transparency and oversight. I was delighted when Speaker Johnson established this committee in 2018 to laser focus our attention on the city's capital budget. And I celebrate the work of my predecessor as chair, Vanessa Gibson, in elaborating on that important vision with hearings over the past 3 years. Today, we're here to discuss restarting the city's capital program, which came to a screeching halt in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, when the market for municipal bonds seized up, largely because of investors' fear that the pandemic would put cities at fiscal risk. The administration rightly went into triage mode to conserve our limited capital dollars and prioritize health and safety capital projects. This shutdown affected a wide range of capital activities. For example, contracts that were at the controller's office about to be registered were clawed back. OMB stopped granting most certificates to proceed, and early stage design and planning work was largely put on hold. The comedic examples of Charlie Chaplin in The Modern Times and Lucy and Ethel in I Love Lucy remind us that on factory assembly lines, workers must work together and consistently to avoid creating bottlenecks and fouling the entire production process, let alone the chocolates. Likewise, the capital pipeline consists of dozens of discrete steps to advance projects from vague early stage ideas to permanent public infrastructure. Its success ultimately requires continuous effort across all stages because of limited capacity at each step. With the city's bonding capacity now restored, although we can certainly hear more about that, the challenge is how to restart a stalled capital process and address the accumulated backlog of projects that were put on pause or never commenced. This challenge will largely fall to the Department of Design and Construction, which in its capacity as the city's expert capital construction project manager is responsible for the design, construction, and coordination of capital projects for city agencies. We are joined today by DDC's First Deputy Commissioner, Jamie Torres Springer, and Chief Financial Officer, Rachel Lazerin, someone who I happen to know is expert in this field. And I look forward to hearing the department's vision for this Herculean task. Before I conclude, I want to thank the staff who helped prepare for this hearing. And in particular, I'd like to thank the Finance Division and subcommittee staff whose work I've always admired. Nathan Toth, Deputy Director, Chima Obichari, Unit Head, Monica Bujak, Financial Analyst, Rebecca Chasen, Senior Counsel, and Noah Brick, Assistant Counsel. And of course, from my staff, Madhuri Shukla, my Legislative Director, Sarah Crean, my Communications Director, and Cindy Cardinal, my Chief of Staff. I will now turn it over to our committee counsel to go over some procedural items and swear in the witnesses, and then we will hear testimony from DDC. Thank you.
Thank you. I am Noah Brick, counsel to the City Council Subcommittee on Capital Budget. Before we begin, I want to remind everybody that you will be on mute until you are called upon to testify, at which point you will be unmuted by the Zoom host. I will be calling on panelists to testify. Please listen for your name to be called, as I will periodically announce who the next panelist will be. We will first hear testimony from the administration, which will then be followed by questions from council members and then testimony from members of the public. I will now administer the oath. Please raise your right hands. Do you affirm that your testimony will be truthful to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, Mr. Torres Springer?
Yes.
Ms. Lazarin?
Yes.
And I see we're also joined by Mr. Holwick in case he jumps in. Mr. Holwick, can you also affirm?
Yes.
Thank you. Before I ask Mr. Torres Springer to start his testimony, I just want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Lander. Mr. Torres Springer, you may begin when ready.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair and council members. Before I start with testimony, I just wanted to, I did get a message a minute ago that my microphone wasn't working. So can everyone hear me?
You're good. Okay, you're not good. We just lost you. No problem.
That was perfect timing, Chair. I think in like a future video about Zoom hearings, you know, being able to hear them and then not would be.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I switched to my backup, which is a little more of an awkward setup, but should work. Always have a backup.
Nice.
Let me just switch. Okay, there we go. So good morning, Chair Rosenthal and other members of the subcommittee. I do actually, before I start the prepared remarks, I do also want to thank Councilmember Gibson for her work as chair of this subcommittee. It's been really productive for us over the last few years to engage with this subcommittee, both in hearings and also offline in the many meetings that we've had about the preparation and implementation of DDC's strategic blueprint for construction excellence, which has led to the last year aside, which we'll talk about, significant improvements in how we deliver on capital projects. So I really want to thank Councilmember Gibson for working with us on that. As you mentioned, I'm Jamie Torres Springer. I'm First Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Design and Construction. I'm happy to appear before you today to discuss the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on DDC's capital program. And I'm joined by Rachel Lazarin, our Chief Financial Officer. Rachel joined us fairly recently and has been making a huge difference for us based on, as you say, years of experience across city government, including previously at DDC, which has been a huge advantage for us. I want to begin my testimony on this subject by describing DDC's role in the city's capital construction process. We're the city's design and construction manager for much of its capital portfolio. We collaborate with more than 20 sponsor agencies and the Office of Management and Budget to help ensure the constructability and the scope of projects presented to us initially through our front-end planning unit. Once a sponsor agency project is approved to move forward, we then use the budget allocation and proceed with design and construction while working to ensure this is done as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. To give you the sense of the scope of our overall portfolio, the total value of active projects at the moment is a little bit in excess of $22 billion across nearly 700 active projects. The pandemic has been a challenging time for DDC as it has for the city as a whole. There have also been some positive impacts, which I will explain. But first, I'd like to take the opportunity to publicly thank the DDC staff who have continued to work through very difficult conditions to keep our projects on track and who have played an outsized role in creating the field hospitals, testing and vaccination sites, and other facilities the city needs for an effective pandemic response. I've personally witnessed the dedication and tireless effort of these frontline professionals, and they deserve a tremendous amount of credit. So starting with the early pandemic, as you're aware, on March 7th of last year, the governor issued Executive Order 202 declaring a disaster emergency throughout the state because of COVID-19. The governor's order led to an executive order by the mayor enforcing the state's mandate at the local level. DDC then worked with our partner agencies to determine the best way to proceed in the earliest and darkest days of the pandemic in a manner that would protect our employees, our contractors and vendors, and the general public, while still carrying out our duty to the public at the highest level possible. The agency's infrastructure construction projects, which by their nature affect the critical delivery of drinking water, as well as the proper functioning of the sewer and the surface transportation systems, continued without significant delay. Periodically, projects were paused when there were health issues on the work site for a quarantine period, but then restarted safely. Within days of the declaration, most of our public buildings portfolio in construction, with the exception of a handful of projects, really just about 7, that were essential to life safety, were paused. Our Division of Site and Safety Support worked closely with our Infrastructure Division and our Public Buildings Division during this time to develop protocols, checklists, and educational materials that would allow projects to continue with the smallest amount of risk. Subsequently, consultant design work paused as much of the city locked down and the impacts of the crisis widened. Exceptions were made for critical programs such as the Eastside Coastal Resiliency Project, for projects with outside deadlines, such as for a consent decree or where there was significant federal or state funding that was on a clock or a deadline, and for a small number of projects that were deemed critical by the Department of Environmental Protection for the performance of the water and sewer systems. So there, just to be clear, I'm talking about the projects that we had in design that were not yet in construction, but were in design. And then getting to the period of restarting our work, last June, DDC began restarting the public buildings construction projects in consultation with OMB and our sponsor agencies. We have since returned all projects to construction, and over the last several months, we have gradually restarted the most design consultant contracts for both public buildings and infrastructure projects, again in consultation with our partner or sponsor agencies. We expect to resume all outstanding work over the next few months, although I must note that this timeline is subject to change based on the city's cash flow needs. We also remain ready to assist OMB and our sponsor agencies in navigating their future capital plan prioritizations. Looking ahead, we're looking forward to outlining our capital plan at our upcoming hearing on the preliminary budget. In short, the preliminary budget reflects continued strong investment in both our infrastructure and public buildings divisions. But again, we must qualify that those investments are subject to change based on the city's budget needs. I just want to spend a minute on our work during the pandemic, for which we're extremely proud. Though DDC was impacted by the pandemic, staff were responsible for truly heroic work, working closely with New York City Emergency Management, the Health and Hospitals Corporation, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and many, many others, we built the facilities the city has relied on to manage the pandemic. Briefly, since the pandemic began, the agency has designed and built 2 field hospitals with 1,100 patient beds, including a number of beds for those in intensive care. We've designed and built 28 COVID testing sites across the city, with many that include space for on-site contact tracing. We've procured for health and hospitals 8 mobile testing trucks, which are weatherproofed and able to be deployed at COVID hotspots outdoors in the winter. We've expanded 4 health department laboratories and upgraded them with negative air pressure handling. That's how much of the rapid PCR testing results in the city are being produced. And finally, we have substantially completed from start to finish 3 large COVID centers of excellence, which are post-COVID ambulatory care facilities that health and hospitals will operate as community clinics, specially designed to manage the long-term healthcare needs of New Yorkers recovering from COVID. And these have been built in neighborhoods that have been deeply impacted by the pandemic, including Morrisania, Bushwick, and Elmhurst. So we're very proud of that set of projects. We're also now deeply engaged in creating vaccination centers and the vaccination rollout effort in general. We recently completed the large vaccination sites at Yankee Stadium and at the Empire Outlets on the North Shore of Staten Island. And we're in the midst of preparing to create a number of additional vaccination expansion sites in Staten Island, Manhattan, and the Bronx, while our colleagues at the School Construction Authority manage a number of site build-outs in Brooklyn and Queens. This has been a remarkable effort by DDC staff, and it has placed them on the front lines of the pandemic with much of the risk and urgency experienced by other frontline personnel, and we're very proud of them. The COVID work I have described was performed under procurement rules allowed by the states and cities' emergency declarations, and the fact that we were able to deliver hundreds of millions of dollars of construction from start to finish in mere months shows what the agency is capable of when working outside the typical constrained procurement, administrative, and oversight regime. What's more, the work was emblematic of the foundational goals of DDC's Blueprint for Construction Excellence: efficiency, process improvement, and quality project delivery. Our COVID work is ongoing, but we are already reviewing these successes and will make future recommendations for how to improve the capital construction processes based on our experiences since March. That will likely include changes to Local Law 63, which currently requires a 60-day waiting period before any type of consultant contracts can be advertised to even begin the procurement process. It's worth noting that many of our infrastructure projects, which remained in construction throughout the pandemic, also saw remarkable progress and were able to be finished well ahead of schedule. We attribute this to decreased vehicle and pedestrian traffic, which allowed our staff and contractors to get more generous work permits and work much more quickly in the field. Indeed, I was there in June when we celebrated with the Department of Transportation the completion of phase 2 of the rebuilding of Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, a $48 million project that finished 6 months ahead of schedule and has brought traffic calming and many other safety enhancements to over a mile-long stretch of this very busy thoroughfare. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Rachel and I are happy to answer any questions that you and your colleagues may have.
Well, thank you so much. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Grodenchik. Welcome. I actually want to start by something that you just mentioned in your testimony, that you have a lead-in that was just terrific, where you talked about during COVID and with the state of emergency, there were many things that were lifted, so you were able to move more quickly. And I'm really interested in understanding what those things were. In your testimony, you mentioned Local Law 63 and traffic, both of which I get, but neither of which are state. I mean, I guess Local Law 63, but I'm really interested in learning what those state or city regulations were Even if you could just mention a couple and well, I guess this is public testimony, but we won't hold you to it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, although we clearly have been struggling like everyone else throughout the pandemic, I mean, this remains one of the most important things for our agenda, and something that we would prefer to talk about more than anything else, which is how we can as one of my colleagues likes to say, remove the handcuffs from DDC so that we can deliver more effectively. So I would summarize what we've been able to do with emergency work during the pandemic in basically in 3 categories. The first is alternative modes of delivery. So we were not consigned to using the conventional design, bid, build process, which has been historically the only way that DDC can deliver because of the low bid requirement in General Municipal Law 103. And we have received authorization from the state legislature to use design build, but in a fairly constrained way. And so in the pandemic, we were able on an emergency basis to hire a construction manager and bring that construction manager together with a design team as an integrated project delivery team and have them design and build the project. We're able to maintain all of the constraints, get all the paperwork done. They, competitively bid much of the construction work wherever possible, and yet we're able to, in the case of those centers of excellence, projects that would have taken 4 or 5 years, we got them built. $120 million worth of capital work, we got them built in less than 9 months. That's very significant. Probably, the most significant thing is just giving us alternative modes of delivery. The second thing is streamlining the notice and hearings process. And that's an example of where Local Law 63 does add months to procurement, where effectively we need to advertise 60 days before we advertise. And if we haven't done that, we have to just stop and wait. And so, I think Local Law 63 is well-founded legislation by the council, but there are surgical improvements that could be made to make it easier for us. The third is emergency oversight, in which we're able to register contracts immediately because there was streamlined oversight at OMB, and we're not required to go through the standard comptroller reviews, which also typically add months to our procurements. And so the role of various oversights, including the controller in the registering DDC contracts, is something that certainly we would recommend taking a hard look at after this.
Wow, you answered more than I thought you would. So thank you for that.
We were ready with that one.
Yeah, I'm taking notes, trying to keep up with you. It's very, very helpful. Are the changes to the controller's review written into, are the controller's review process written into the charter, or is that more rulemaking within the office of the controller?
I might defer some of that to the Mayor's Office of Contract Services and the Law Department. I mean, I would say in general that there is a step, contract registration, which does go to the controller, and within the charter, it's narrowly defined as basically checking if a project if funds have been appropriated, and checking to make sure that we've done the appropriate reviews of the vendor, and that has often become a more significant and lengthy review. Which and the preparation for that more significant and lengthy review has slowed us down quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And is there a way, just sort of thinking about this hearing, this proposed hearing topic, which this is now turned into, I'm wondering if would you be able to do, perhaps with the Mayor's Office of Contracts, sort of a side-by-side of what changes were made with the controller's review over that period of time? and or whether or not changes were made during that review. In other words, if we made it a shorter review period, what would the impact be on outcomes? Would you be able to do that kind of analysis?
Sure. Yeah, we'd be happy to give you something on that.
Great. Okay, let me ask you, could you just mention a few of the projects that DDC was able to continue during the pause and the OMB slowdown? Like immense kudos for all the work you did with the vaccine sites, the test and trace, the hospitals, like amazing. But were there any projects that had been going prior to the pause that continued? And how did that go in terms of, now being under the emergency procurement rules?
Yeah, happy to. So as I was mentioning, our infrastructure portfolio, which is basically roads, water, and sewer, which is about 60% of DDC's capital portfolio, that was able to continue. It was essential work under the governor's and the mayor's executive orders. It also, those sites are outdoors, so it was relatively straightforward to maintain social distance and appropriate health and safety controls. So all of those projects continued. And as I mentioned, many of them were accelerated. And I think I mentioned in the testimony, we opened a significant improvement to Atlantic Avenue. We've completed a number of different street and sewer and water reconstruction projects over the last year. The public buildings side of the portfolio had been shut down. Again, not covered except for the essential life safety projects. Not covered in the executive order, generally indoors, harder to maintain social distance. So we were able to bring those back online safely in June. We did have a tremendous effort by our site safety group to make sure that we put all new protocols in place. Mask wearing, primary among them. I do sort of personally spent a lot of time in the late spring and during the summer driving around to sites where mask wearing hadn't become sort of culturally accepted within the construction industry yet, and we did take a very hard line on that. So there were a number of cases that emerged on our construction sites, and we would shut down that site, quarantine the people who had been closely linked to each other, and then bring it back. But the cases actually really were kept to quite a minimum. And then I think I was mentioning that most of our design that is consultant-based because of cash flow concerns, budget concerns, was paused. And we did keep the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project going. We started that project in November in the field in the northern section. We've just received bids for the southern section of the project. We did pause our borough-based jails program for a number of months, and we revised the schedule as a result of that, but it is now going, and we expect to register significant work on all 4 of the borough-based jail sites before the end of this year. And then a lot of other projects have been restarted and have kept going, which I could go on and on about, but that's some of the highlights.
May I ask, would it be in the control? I want to ask about the borough-based jails. This is totally off message, and I promise my last question will be back to being on message. But could the controller slow down registration of those borough-based jail contracts?
Well, so I'll just say that the borough-based jails are, we are using the design build authorization for those projects. It's great. I would love a chance to talk more about our design build program today as well. We are moving through getting contracts ready to be awarded and registered. We've had a very good dialogue and cooperative relationship with the controller's office, just sort of all of us recognizing that design build was coming and it required a change in the way that we need to approach the whole contract process. So we're very hopeful that things go smoothly.
Great to hear. I was really proud to vote in support of the borough-based jails, and also very proud to vote for the renewable Rikers plan. And so really want to make sure that that building happens quickly. And if there's anything this committee can do to help, we stand ready. My last question is, and you're starting to answer that question, but what are the largest barriers to DDC's immediate progress in ramping up to full capacity? Are there projects that went out to bid but are waiting to be registered where DDC would now need to refresh or reopen stale bids? Honestly, I mean, if you can speak to, OMB's, whether or not they're lifting, the chokehold, rightly so, what they did on moving CPs through the process. So what are the largest barriers now to ramping up to full capacity?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd start by saying that I think in many ways we're well positioned for the restart. As I said, construction has been restarted for some time. All of our in-house design, which is primarily how we do the infrastructure design, that's in-house, that's been going. And we've gradually been restarting our public buildings, our external design projects, and hope to restart 100% of them over the coming months. We did have projects that were bid and were put on hold for, as you say, for the CP issuance and the registration. But so far, no vendors have withdrawn their previously open bids, which is great. There's still a lot of interest in working with DDC and the city. And so we're pretty confident. I mean, I would just say, sort of to your point, council member, the economic crisis that was brought about by COVID-19 is far from over, and it's forced the city to make some difficult decisions with respect to spending. At the moment, all projects that have been paused are planned to restart over the next few months. But I'd say on behalf of the administration as a whole that this is really subject to change based on the city's cash flow needs, and we remain in a dire budget situation, and that's really what could have the biggest impact.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you have a list of priorities where you could sort of say, here's our list, top 10, next 20, whatever?
Yeah, I think, as I was saying in the testimony, I mean, we in a sense are the delivery agency. My understanding is that the sponsor agencies have made priority lists and have sent those in to OMB, and they've been analyzing them. We know that, as I was saying, there's a certain set of criteria, life safety, is there a consent decree, is there federal or state funding that's at risk and that's on a deadline, is it essential work in some way? Those are certainly where the priorities lie. And then beyond that, there's a prioritization by the sponsor agencies, and at some point we'll be told what the priorities are and we'll design and build them.
I think you just answered my follow-up question. Do you play a role in deciding? Are there meetings with the agency heads, your office, OMB, contracts together to decide, or is that really in OMB's house?
There's a lot of dialogue. We have, over the last few years, created just a fabulous front-end planning group and really empowered that group. It was kind of something that was missing from the city as a whole. We have the Department of City Planning. They have a capital planning group that's focused on sort of the inputs of capital planning. I mean, where should we build and what are the demographics and so on. And what we were missing was kind of something focusing on the outputs, which is a project constructible? Is it, how much of a priority is it sort of physically in terms of the city's infrastructure that we get a project going? And we have that capacity at the front end planning group. So they're very engaged in the discussions that take place between the sponsor agencies and OMB as priorities are set.
You know, as that is awesome. And let's sort of put a pin in that discussion, because for sure that'll be the topic of another hearing, as the speaker has put out a plan to talk about these issues of coordination between the agencies and community input, et cetera. So I'll look forward to that hearing, and it sounds like you've made some headway, which is really terrific. All right, thank you. I'm going to turn it back now to the committee council. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you. I will now call on council members to ask questions in the order in which they have used the Zoom raise hand function. If you'd like to ask questions, please raise your hand. We will now hear from Council Member Lander.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for convening this hearing, and congrats on being the chair of this committee. And thanks for your work in pushing on these issues in the past and now. And Deputy Commissioner, it's great to see you. I want to say thank you to you, but on behalf of your whole agency, for the quite remarkable work DDC has done in response to COVID. I've had the chance to see some of those testing sites that you guys put up. I haven't been to the big vaccination sites yet, but I'm excited to see those as well. And it is impressive, and we're grateful. And I also want to thank you for the work you've been doing through your strategic planning process to transform DDC. I think before you and Commissioner Grillo got there, I did not feel, I think the council broadly did not feel, but I certainly did not feel that the agency was really taking seriously the need for significant transformation of our capital projects management system. And there's a long way to go, certainly, but there's no doubt that you are taking it seriously, building a team that has made a lot of progress. And I also want to appreciate your answer to Chair Rosenthal's question about what some of those next steps look like, and how the council and other partners, including the Controller's Office, can be a valuable part of helping really accelerate. I think we're entering a moment when we need to jumpstart our economy, when we need a bold recovery, when getting projects going now so they employ people and create jobs, even as they're building a platform for a more sustainable and thriving future, is just really critical. So I'm glad you've done that work. We absolutely want to be your partner in pushing forward on it. I do want to ask some questions about the pausing and unpausing, because I do have to be honest, and I think more of my frustration sits in the nexus that you were just describing with Chair Rosenthal about OMB. But I found it very difficult to understand why some decisions got made about what was paused when and why, and what was unpaused when and why. And I had some public disagreements with OMB, because I think they simply said there were some things that were straightforward. Obviously, during the period when all construction was shut down, things were shut down. Safety comes first. But then cash flow got used to cover over everything. Like, I did not feel like meaningful public information was provided to get clear how much cash flow there was for capital projects, why things were unpaused when they were, whose decision it was, and how the council, much less the public, couldn't know any of it. So I just want to start with one project in particular before I ask about the general questions. And you might not know about it, so if you want to pick a different project, you can, but it's the one that I was familiar with is on 4th Avenue. We have a major DOT project, that was restriped to create bike lanes and pedestrian safety, but a project, I don't remember the number, it's like between $50 and $100 million. So pretty sizable project, not life-saving urgency. It's not an emergency project, but it is a road safety project. And I understood you to say that those were in this top priority. But from my conversations with the contractor, and in that case, it had already been designed, it had been bid. A contractor who I think happened to be an MWBE was standing by to hire people and get going, and got no information on when the project was restarted. It was paused for months, well past the summer pause. I could not get information on when it, what was going on with it. And I guess I'm asking a couple of questions because I don't really understand what happened with that project, when and how and why those decisions got made, and how I or any members of the public or even the contractor themselves could have gotten the relevant information.
Sure. I'm happy to come back with some more details on that one, council member. I guess my understanding of that issue, I mean, it's sort of a project that was sitting in between, right? As I was mentioning, a project that was in active construction was restarted in June for a project that was designed but not fully registered and ready to start. There are a number of other contractual components that have to be met. One is that we need a separate engineering firm to serve as the project oversight. And I should confirm this, but I believe that it was an issue with getting that what's called an REI, resident engineer inspector, getting that firm in place through the pause. To your last point, we have an intergovernmental relations group, and we also engage with the contractors very directly. So I'm not actually sure exactly. I don't recall exactly who that contractor is, but they certainly should know to call us and get an update. And we would really encourage you in your office to give us a call if you need an update on the status of as I know you do.
I didn't mean that you were non-responsive. I reached out to your agency and you gave me some information about the project. So, and of course, I think the contractor knew they weren't able to begin. It's helpful to understand. I just think I was as clear. When you say unpaused, you meant projects that were already in construction, had been paused in construction and were unpaused in construction, and projects that were at other points in our capital projects system. Yes. I wasn't thinking of this one as in design because it was post-design, it had been bid, a bid had been awarded, but it's true construction had not started. And it sounds like that all that set of projects that were shy of construction starting, are just in individual project specific states of how they were able and when they were able to be picked up. But I guess this goes to my question about, go ahead, sorry.
Council member, I would just also say, I mean, I would defer some of the budget questions to OMB, but I would say on their behalf, I mean, there was a moment where, authorizing any additional spending was just not possible based on the capital market situation that the city was in. So it just, as difficult as it was, just any new spending obligations was just not something that the city could do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to finance the projects.
So I hear that, but I have two problems with it. And I guess I'm just going to put them out there and ask you to respond to them, because I feel like two things overlapped here. One is no meaningful information was given to the council or to the public to evaluate that it's not that I don't believe it, but no, we didn't get any information. And then I really do believe OMB held on to that argument long after it was true. I 100% agree with you. There was a period of time when a dire cash flow crunch, when the tax collections were delayed for a quarter, we did not have the money. And there really was a cash flow issue in which you want to pay people their payroll. And look, it's the same bank account that's paying the payroll and paying the debt on the bonds. And so, that was real. I believe that it was real for a fairly brief period of time. And that OMB, in their job of trying to slow things down and have us spend less money and act as, for fiscal prudence, then slow walked capital projects far beyond what was necessary for cash flow purposes, using that argument. And I guess my frustration is the council nor the public got information really on either side, either meaningfully on cash flow position, but also on, you've described a productive dialogue between you, the authorizing agencies, and OMB, but the council has no visibility into that process whatsoever. And we can call and ask about an individual project, but if our questions are about the system, don't we want to be restarting more projects? Don't we need to be diving in more aggressively to get them going? So we're creating jobs and priming our economy and moving forward. What should I have been using to evaluate whether the city's getting it right?
Yeah, I think I would really have to defer that question to OMB, council member.
Okay. I'm
going to ask you to start to wrap up, but of course.
Thank you. I'll just ask one final question. Yeah. And then, which is sort of related to this, because I appreciate that this is an OMB question. It's just, if our, you've persuaded me that for those things that were already in construction, they're now moving forward. I still think we are moving too slowly on capital projects, throughput of projects in the system. And I don't fully understand why. And I think it's a mistake for the city's economic recovery. And I want us to move faster. And some of that are the reforms you laid out, but some of them are, I think, the reforms I'm asking for. So we'll ask OMB. I guess just to that final point, then my last question is, for evaluating that question, what's lost by delays? How do you think about that? Obviously some of it we just had to do, but things wind up costing more. We lose jobs by not creating them, even if they're going to happen in the future. Like, that's a reduction of our overall capital plan because things get pushed off into the future. I mean, I know it's your job is to manage the projects and move them forward as quickly as you can, but do you or does someone provide some evaluation of what the consequences are of delays as we think about how to push things forward and evaluate?
I guess I would sort of give a narrow answer from our perspective, which is we certainly do look at and keep track of time delays on projects, which is clearly important, and we are going to see time. I don't want to. We haven't sort of said it explicitly, but we are going to see delays in project completions as a result of this pause, and that does have, at least for our portfolio, sometimes will have impacts in terms of escalation. We haven't seen that yet from contractors, which is good. And then, of course, pausing and then restarting has costs in terms of mobilization and remobilization costs. So those are the things that we keep track of as an agency.
All right, I thank you for that. This is not the hearing on the capital projects tracker, but I know we'll be having a hearing on some adjustments to that shortly. And at that hearing, I'll look forward to asking about how, which obviously that relates to some of what you've just said, and I'll look forward to having the conversation next time.
Happy to be working with you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Commissioner, and thank you especially, Madam Chair, for convening this hearing.
Terrific. Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any other, I'm turning it back to you, Noah Brick. My apologies.
I see that Councilmember Grodenchik has his hand raised if he'd like to ask some questions now.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's certainly good to see you here. We'll miss Miss Gibson, but I see she's around. So just the last question the last comment by Councilman Lander. I have nothing but respect for Miss Grillo, your commissioner. I know her for a generation. I won't say how old we are, but I'll leave it at that. Since she's taken over, and I know the whole team there has taken steps, this is a little bit akin to what we're talking about today. The number of steps that need to be taken for a capital project in the city of New York to move from thought to completion are, to be generous, bewildering, to be ungenerous, insane. And I'm wondering if you could enlighten us on some of I know that this has not been an easy time for you, for our city, but I'm just wondering if there has been some success in that.
Yeah, Councilmember, thank you for giving us the opportunity to address that. So as you know, we created a strategic plan for trying to address some of those issues. And we really did. And we've spent some time with Councilmember Gibson and the committee talking about this in the past. We really did break down every step of the process into its component parts and say, what is taking too long that could be relieved, or, really important in this type of work, what can be done at the same time so that one thing isn't holding something else up. And as a result of that, I will say that before the pandemic, we had already seen a 6-month improvement in the average time to deliver a project, which, in the very short term that we had been looking at, which was only a couple of years, that was really impressive. And that was really about, to your point, we were able to reduce the time it takes to initiate a project, meaning from the time that the budget is appropriated and the project comes to DDC until the time that we start designing it, we were able to reduce that time from a year to about 8 months already. And that was through a number of different process improvements, which I think are some of the more frustrating components of the process for the council as well, so that we use our front-end planning unit to be much more clear up front. And then the other component is through streamlining procurement. We had saved an additional 3 months. The pandemic will obviously have impacts on overall timeframes, but we've put a number of other measures into place to reduce the time it takes to design a project and to build a project, which is where the real time savings can be found. So we're definitely excited to keep working on all of that.
Thank you. I figured it was an opportunity to talk about it just for a few minutes, and I want to thank the chair for indulging me. And with that, Madam Chair, I will relinquish back to you.
Chair Rosenthal, it looks like Councilmember Gibson now has her hand raised. If we can recognize her, please.
So good to see you. Welcome back, Chair. Go get him. But you have to unmute.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Madam Chair. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. I want to congratulate Chair Rosenthal on becoming the new chair of the Subcommittee on Capital. You are in good hands under your leadership, and I look forward to remaining a member of the committee and really talking about a lot of the great things that we've started working with DDC and OMB and the mayor's office, and really recognizing that, COVID-19 has been a real setback for us all across the city in so many ways and on so many levels. So I appreciate the work that DDC has done. President Grillo, I've talked to her many, many times during the pandemic, because I know while we were on pause, we really didn't have the ability to do much of anything. And when the pause was lifted, we can essentially restart a lot of our capital. So I just have two very quick questions just about prioritizing some of the capital projects that were already in queue that were halted because of the moratorium that was in place. And it's one project, and I know, Deputy Commissioner, you are very familiar with, that I have to bring up again, since it falls within my borough of the Bronx Children's Museum. We've been working on this for several years now, my entire time in the council, and we were on track to officially open in 2020. And now with the pandemic, that's been, of course, delayed. So I wonder, the challenges that you talked about with your existing capital and cash flow, how can we be assured, and what steps is DDC going to take to prioritize some of these projects that are really, in terms of delayed, been around for a little while? Would it be safe to say that this project, as one example, would be prioritized, just because there was so many other projects that I know that you have in your portfolio, as well as new projects, right? We know that you're getting new projects each year. So what can you say to us that would help us understand how you're prioritizing some of the outstanding capital projects in your portfolio?
Sure. Thanks, Council Member. And we certainly know the importance of that project to you, and know that you do. It should be said very publicly. You do stay on top of us on that project. And so that's a project that's actively in construction. It was, as I mentioned, paused due to the executive order in the spring for a number of months. It's now restarted. I don't have a new completion date handy. We can get back to you on that, but I do know that it's progressing towards substantial completion despite some delay. And it's certainly, everything in active construction is a priority. We work by contracting with the builder community, put all the pieces in place, and then they go to work, and they are highly incentivized to build as quickly as they can, despite what often comes up, which is complexities and problems. So there's no issue or constraint in terms of prioritizing that project for completion.
Okay, and then my other question is, working with a lot of our vendors and understanding that everyone is hurting, right? We realize that a lot of these projects, Chair Rosenthal, Councilmember Lander, Councilmember Grodenchik, we all talk about the impact that upstarting and restarting these capital projects brings on the economy, the jobs that are impacted, the vendors that you hire that then in turn hire subcontractors, and the impact that it has in creating jobs. I mean, I've been talking a lot about it during the pandemic, that we have to get people back to work, because recognizing so many folks have lost income, lost revenue, fallen behind in mortgage and rent payments. I mean, we've all struggled to survive. So I wonder, how is DDC able to help now that we're restarting capital projects? How are you able to help any potential vendors that you work with that may have a cash flow issue, right? And it's just because they haven't been paid, there's a delay in, contract payments. Are you able to offer any assistance at a vendor level?
I mean, thank you for raising that, because it certainly, we know how important we are to the construction industry in the city, and it was painful for us to have to pause the project, to be dealing with the vendors day in and day out who are struggling, particularly the small ones. And, it must be said, the minority women business enterprises, for which we've made so much progress. And I do want to say that this has been one of Commissioner Grillo's great priorities as the leader of this agency, was to increase our MWBE participation. So it was very difficult for us. A couple things I've mentioned. One is, as I mentioned earlier, we've done an enormous amount of pandemic-related emergency construction work, and that has been an opportunity to get work to vendors. We're very proud of the participation that we've achieved for MWBEs. For just as one example, the $120 million Center of Excellence, the ambulatory post-COVID facilities that we built for H&H in just 6 to 9 months, we achieved a 46% MWB participation rate. We were able to do that because many of the constraints that make it difficult for us to figure out how to contract for projects quickly that I've described earlier were lifted. And so we were able to really push our MWBE goals. The other thing that we've worked on over the last couple of years is just getting payments out quickly. And we're very pleased with our payment processing time. It is under 30 days once we receive a completed payment package. We've established a group that reports to Rachel, our CFO, that works on prioritizing payments. And we always try to make sure that the vendors are know how to contact us and call us if there's a payment that's problematic, and we work on facilitating it as quickly as we can.
Okay. Sorry, Chair Rosenthal, just two very quick final questions. You know that we all are very concerned individually as council members about our discretionary capital. Some of us are leaving at 12:01 on December 31st, but who's counting? But we want to make sure that at least a lot of our projects are started. And, it's just been really frustrating because I realize a lot of projects that, we allocated in, previous fiscal years, FY20, FY21, while many of them may have started in design, everything has been halted. So we know that there will be delays. So I'm wondering, since that time, since the pandemic has hit, has there been any changes in terms of staff to the unit that handles capital discretionary in terms of more manpower, more staff that will help expedite these projects? And then the second part of the conversation just really relates to the blueprint. A year after you first announced the blueprint, we had like a 1-year look back in terms of the success and what has happened. Should we be expecting any amendments to that blueprint in light of COVID-19 in terms of any new strategies you may develop with the front end planning unit or anything like that we should expect this year?
I might, in a moment, I might ask Rachel, our CFO, to respond about the discretionary projects.
Okay.
But the answer to your question is, I think, as I've mentioned a couple of times, that plan of ours, in a way, becomes even more salient and important, the many things that are in that plan. And we can see evidence that some of the reforms around streamlining, hearings and public notices, alternative modes of project delivery, streamlining oversight and registration, that's really what's at the core of that strategic plan, that those things have all been proven to be very effective during the pandemic. So we're certainly, we intend to keep it updated, keep tracking our progress, and also engage with this committee and with the council as a whole on some of these improvements that we can make. Rachel, did you want to say something about the discretionary program?
Sure. Yeah, appreciate the question. It's we understand how important these projects are to the council and to the community. And just as Jamie mentioned before, those projects were paused for some period of time They have been unpaused, and we are working through them. We're working with OMB, with the not-for-profits, and Council Finance to get all those projects back on track. And of course, if you have questions about specific projects, we're always happy to follow up afterwards.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I hope that, DDC considers some of these projects that we're talking about in terms of capital discretionary are very small. They're not multi-million-dollar capital projects. They're $100,000 for a mobile unit, right? Which, proves very beneficial right now since we're not doing indoor events, but we have mobile units outside, reaching people in the streets. Those are the types of projects that, we would like to see prioritized, simply because they shouldn't be complicated. They're a small dollar amount and they would have a tremendous impact. So, I will be reaching out to you guys about my own local, but collectively, just as a council, I would ask for consideration of looking at a lot of these projects in terms of the magnitude, the scope, the size, and where you can expedite. Certainly we would love to see that, because a lot of these projects really do make a real difference in our communities, especially in light of COVID. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chair Rosenthal. Appreciate your time today. And congratulations.
Thank you. Actually, to follow up on your question, Councilwoman Gibson, would DDC be willing to have a small working group, tiny working group, to look at projects, the council member discretionary projects, and maybe, just sort of work with you on priorities, given the timeline that some of us are under?
Yeah, I'd say we're happy to do whatever is useful. I do know that we are very engaged with Council Finance on the discretionary program. So, and I would have to check, or maybe Rachel knows. I think we already have a group that meets maybe monthly. So maybe we just pull that all together to make sure that we're tracking everything. But yeah, happy to whatever's useful.
Great, busted. I haven't asked the staff that question myself. So great to know, and I'm sure you guys are already on top of it, but thank you. So I have two last questions that I just want to get the answers on the record. So here they go. DDC's recent capital workflow represents a small portion of the capital program that your client agencies have pursued in the past years. Since you weren't able to complete all the projects that were on tap for last year and new projects added for fiscal year 21 adoption and throughout this year so far, what kind of project backlog is the agency facing? And secondly, as DDC returns to its normal level of ongoing capital projects in its portfolio, what assistance or guidance is the administration giving to help some of the backlog? And that could include, perhaps not subjecting this part of the agency as much to the hiring freeze.
I think, Rachel, do you want to comment on the status of our commitment plan?
Yeah, sure. So, as you probably know and I guess will be a hearing in a few weeks about the budget, but, last year's commitment plan was just over $2 billion for DDC. The current commitment plan for this fiscal year is now 2.7 billion, right? So that has increased because a lot of projects that couldn't complete or we couldn't register them at the end of last fiscal year rolled into this year. So right now we are seeing a larger commitment plan. Next year is comparably large. We're going into obviously the next budget cycle where we're starting to look at what actually can be committed this fiscal year. And maybe pushing some things out. And, this is where we work really closely with our sponsor agencies to really analyze what can be done by fiscal year. I think Chair Rosenthal, you mentioned at the beginning kind of the assembly line, that Lucy and Ethel image, and I think that's very appropriate. I mean, it is very much how we think about it, and having kind of that halted, and now that we're getting back on track, it's going to be a slow ramp up, and we're not going to be able to catch up. There was a period of time we lost. And we're not going to be able to do double the workload in the next 6 months, but we are ramping back up. We're doing it slowly and in consultation, with the priorities of the administration, and we're ready to go. I mean, bids are opening now, RFPs are going out, CPs are being processed, and we're kind of getting back on that assembly line.
Yeah, great, thank you. You could even, I was just trying to think, over the course of a year, fiscal year, whatever, you could see your workload, and that, to the extent that fiscal year 19 was sort of a usual year, and you could compare that to 20 and then 21, you might see a different workflow. In 20 it being more back end, and maybe 21 starting at a higher level, maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, one of the things we were actually talking about is that one of the things that usually happens, and if you follow kind of commitments throughout the year, is there's a big surge, at the last quarter of the year is when the majority of commitments are made. But because we're kind of starting now, kind of restarting now, we actually anticipate that it's going to be a little flatter next year, that we'll be able to have a lot more registrations in the first half of the year than might be a typical year. So it'll be more sustained, consistent workflow instead of a kind of up and down.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. It helped explain it. Secondly, the council is aware of a letter sent to the DDC design contractors from March 26, 2020, understandably directing them to immediately halt all services under their contracts with DDC, and of a letter written to the mayor by several industry groups protesting the work stoppage. Besides that letter, what did the DDC communicate with its designers and vendor contractors about the slowdown, and how often was that back and forth?
Sure. I would say, I mean, we're in continuous contact with our vendors, our design and engineering consultants, and our contractors. So, and we certainly, in this very difficult time of unfortunately having to stop a lot of this work, we were in regular contact with them. We updated our website on a regular basis. We have a very good interactive relationship with industry associations, again, both on the contracting side and on the architecture and engineering side. And so we did many Zoom meetings with them, and just tried to keep everyone apprised of what was happening.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I hope you'll stay on. This wraps up my set of questions with the administration, but I hope you'll stay on, because I think we're going to hear next from some of those industry representatives, and it'll be interesting to hear their perspective on it. So to the extent that you can leave staff here and then get some feedback, and maybe we can send you their testimony that they've submitted, so you can see what's going on from their perspective, that would be very much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. And yes, we're certainly leave someone here, and we're paying close attention to the hearing.
Great. Thank you so much for coming here today.
Chair.
Really look forward to working with you. I'm going to send it back now to the committee counsel, Noah Brick.
Thank you. We will now turn to testimony from members of the public who signed up in advance to testify. I'd like to remind everyone that, unlike our in-person council hearings, we will be calling individuals one by one to testify. Once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the sergeant at arms will set the timer and announce that you may begin. Your testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. I would now like to welcome Adam Roberts to testify, followed by Bill Murray.
Thank you, Chair
Your time will
Rosenthal
begin
and
now.
members of the committee for holding this hearing today. I'm Adam Roberts, the Director of Policy for the American Institute of Architects, New York, also known as AIA New York. We are the professional association representing New York's public and private sector architects. The design work stoppage at DDC and other agencies has been devastating to our city. Without design, construction cannot move forward. As such, the openings of countless schools, libraries, parks, and other essential projects have already been delayed by a full year. Vulnerable New Yorkers who rely most heavily on our public buildings will be hurt the most by this ongoing delay. The design work stoppage has also reduced the incomes of tens of thousands of architects, engineers, contractors, and tradespeople. For these reasons, labor and industry groups sent a letter to the mayor at the beginning of the pandemic asking that the work stoppage end, and we have yet to receive a reply. The design work stoppage imperils DDC's ability to carry out very time-sensitive projects. One of these is the implementation of design build, a project delivery method by which architects and contractors work simultaneously on design and construction. Last year, the city secured design build authority from New York State. DDC is implementing design build, but the lack of funding for its capital program has meant that essentially one staffer is overseeing this rollout. If the city is restarting these design build projects, then DDC must be sufficiently funded to oversee them. The design work stoppage at DDC also hampers the city's ability to comply with Local Law 97 of 2019, also known as the Climate Mobilization Act. Buildings, including those owned by the city, must begin complying in only a few years. With such a tight deadline to retrofit potentially hundreds of public buildings, the city must allow DDC to begin this work immediately. It will be very problematic if the city failed to comply with its own landmark legislation. During this budget season, we hope council members will fight for the capital program at DDC and other agencies to be fully funded. We recognize that in a fiscal crisis, everyone is urging that their industries be fully funded. Yet the repercussions of not funding the city's capital program will reverberate throughout all sectors of our economy. It goes against good fiscal practice, which is to build more during an economic crisis in order to jumpstart the economy. Again, thank you for holding this hearing and inviting us to testify today.
Chair Rosenthal, do you have any questions for Mr. Roberts?
May I ask you, Council, how many people will be testifying?
We currently have 5 registered to testify who are in the Zoom with us now.
If people wouldn't mind staying on, I'd like to ask questions that probably will be for everyone. So I'd like to keep my questions to the end. I'm really listening to everyone's testimony. Thank you.
Okay, on that basis, can we hear next from Bill Murray, followed by Lisa Alpert?
Your time will begin now.
Okay, good morning, Chair Rosenthal and members of the subcommittee. My name is Bill Murray. I am the New York City Director of Government Relations for the American Council of Engineering Companies of New York, or ACEC New York for short. We are an association representing approximately or nearly 300 consulting, engineering, and affiliate companies with about 30,000 employees in New York State and a concentrated presence in New York City. Just to give you a sense, about 53% of our membership lies in New York City. About 50% of our firms are small, meaning 1 to 35 persons in count, 40% medium, and 10% large firms. What our members do is plan and design the structural, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, civil, environmental, fire protection, and technology systems for both vertical, meaning sort of building infrastructure in the city, as well as horizontal, water, transportation, and so forth. We are thankful for this hearing today. We're also thankful for your leadership, our leaders in government throughout the pandemic. We know it's been challenging to balance the public health crisis and the fiscal fallout that has resulted. The pandemic's impact on the city's capital program has been particularly challenging for our industry, which has included the city's pause on capital program design projects by agencies including, but not limited to, the DDC, the SEA, the DOT, and the EDC. These impacts have created challenges for middle-class New York families who work in and are employed by our industry. This includes many thousands of engineers, construction managers, subcontractors, NWBE firms, which is about 28% of our membership, and small businesses, all of whom we represent. Our members have been doing their best to stay in business over the last 11 months to mitigate layoffs, furloughs, substantial pay cuts, and benefit cuts. But unfortunately, some of these impacts have been a reality for many, if not most, of our members over the recent months. While our organization is marshaling resources to advocate for federal support to the city government, we cannot rely solely on Washington, D.C. to provide our city with an economic recovery. Design work is an essential core component to economic recovery. It's linked to the economic well-being of countless New York families, including not only the architects we just heard from Adam and the engineers, which I am speaking for, but also for general contractors, construction workers, and ancillary industries whose livelihoods are also dependent on the design and construction sector. We therefore urge, that widely across all of the city agencies, design work be resumed and in a robust way. The city needs to be ready to move forward into construction once the COVID emergency has subsided. History has shown infrastructure spending in particular has multiplier effects for the economy. In the short term, it results in good paying local jobs,
Time has expired.
fighting wider economic activity.
Feel free to finish, Bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. In the long term, investment in infrastructure boosts economic health by increasing our economy's supply capacity. For example, improving the transportation system makes workers more mobile, makes labor markets more efficient and more productive. In conclusion, the capital program is not only at the heart of our city's economy, but it is crucial to maintaining our status as a global leader. By investing in capital projects, both design and construction, New York can lead the way out of this difficult time and develop the necessary transportation, environmental, energy, resilient, and business infrastructure that will keep us moving forward. I thank you again for your leadership on this issue and for the time to speak. Thank you.
Okay. 1 second. I'm locating my script. Okay. Can we next hear from Lisa Alpert, followed by Glenn Bolofsky?
Your time will begin now.
Yeah, hi, good morning, Chairperson Rosenthal, members of the council. My name is Lisa Alpert. I'm the Vice President of Development and Programming at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. Feel pretty confident that the capital project I'm going to talk briefly about, which is well underway, is unlike any other project you'll hear about this morning. It's an education and welcome center for a cemetery. And I'm just here today to underscore the importance of continued capital investment to keep our project and so many others moving forward. At Greenwood, our Education and Welcome Center will be directly across the street from our main entrance, combines the restoration of a landmarked greenhouse with new construction, and it will allow us to greatly expand the number of people we serve by giving us critical indoor space. This project is already underway. The greenhouse restoration is almost complete, and the new construction, as everyone likes to hear, is shovel ready. Just very, very quickly, I want to give you some important context for what we do here at Greenwood and why this building is so critical to our South Brooklyn community. Yes, we are still an active cemetery, but our 501c3 organization in normal years, pre-COVID, presents over 250 public programs, tours, and events every year. And in addition, about 300,000 people were coming to Greenwood annually to stroll our beautiful grounds. But last year, 2020, many extraordinary things happened. One in particular was that when the pandemic hit, we made the decision to open all 4 of our gates at Greenwood and staff them until 7 p.m. every night, 7 days a week. And what happened? 600,000 people came to Greenwood to take a walk through our grounds, literally double the number of the previous year. I just want to tell you really briefly about the kinds of programming that we offer, really briefly. We do workforce development programming at Greenwood. We train young people from low-income communities in masonry restoration and historic preservation. We have a major program with Cornell University called the Urban Grasslands Institute on climate change and urban green spaces. We give tours to over 3,500 school students a year, and we host innovative arts and cultural programs on our grounds throughout the year. This capital project is a critical component to allow us to serve even more New Yorkers. And just in conclusion, put very simply, we're a huge outdoor space, but we also need indoor space for school groups and trainings and workshops, and we need a place to offer first-class visitor orientation and visitor services. We have 60% of our funding in hand. The detailed architectural and engineering plans are complete and ready to go. We are shovel ready. Did I say that already? And it will help bring more tourists and thus help accelerate the economic recovery of South Brooklyn. We're really eager to build this structure and to serve our own community and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we next hear from Glenn Belofsky, followed by William Gaddy?
Your time will begin now.
Thank you for your help there unmuting. Good morning, Chair Rosenthal and council members and central staff. Thank everyone for their help here this morning, and congratulations on the debut hearing this morning, Chair Rosenthal. It's going very well, and I'm very appreciative of participating this morning. As a CPA, my background is balance sheets and financial reporting. I worked for Carnegie Hall and many other companies, both in the public and private sector. And I appreciate the financial challenges that DDC struggles with. And I greatly appreciate the points that Adam Roberts and Bill Murray made this morning about their industries as well, and Greenwood Cemetery. It all comes down to available funds, available cash, and available time to analyze how much cash there is at hand at any given time. So, you know, that's really my focus. And at the next opportunity that there presents itself, love to find out from DDC what their burdens are in terms of, and you were asking about this, Chair Rosenthal, their top 10 list, their top 20 list, and Councilman Lander and Barry also, Grodenchik asked about this, as well as Councilwoman Vanessa Gibson asked about this. The clarification is needed as to the top 10, the top 20, what financial shortfalls there are at the immediate moment. And that's the testimony I have this morning.
Thank you very much.
At this time, we appear to have called on all members of the public who are logged onto the Zoom. I've just asked for a last call. Please raise your hand if you are in the Zoom and have not been called upon. Seeing no hands raised, Chair Rosenthal, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you so much. I have 3 questions. 2 are for everyone. So this is primarily for Adam and Bill. What do you think the city could have done differently to alleviate the challenges and the confusion during the emergency orders that were put out during the pandemic?
I think there's a lot they could have done differently. I think our members would have liked a little notice as far as those members who are consulting with DDC and also those who work in DDC. You know, we understand that this was a crisis that just unfolded over the course of only a few weeks, but still, pretty much people received a letter one day and that was it. They were done working. So in a future crisis of this sort, which hopefully we don't have one like this again, that there at least be a few days, if not a few weeks notice that design work will be stopping.
I'd chime in as well and just say, I agree with the sentiments. I think transparency and communication is so crucial. But I do want to publicly say thank you to Jamie Springer Torres, to Andrew, to DDC, also to my counterparts at the EDC, at the DOT. I really feel agency staff has been, in a similar boat to ACEC New York and to the firms we represent, in doing our best to learn information about the decisions at OMB. And we have had regular meetings with our counterparts at the DDC, at sister agencies. And to the extent information was able to be shared, it was, and that continues through today. We have regular meetings with our contacts in those places. But I would say, from the top, we have tried to engage City Hall, including in that letter, Chair, that you referred to. And so I say that, but also I'm aware, on the other hand, this was a crisis, right? The public health crisis, revenues went down as a result, COVID-related expenses went up. And so we trust, good decisions were made at that OMB level, but didn't have a ton of insight into that. And really going forward, I just hope that we can be a voice of, hey, we may not be the most vocal sector out there, but we are a whole industry. There's a whole ecosystem, and the capital program really is fundamental to the city's economy. So we hope that sort of going forward, as the situation improves, you can consider that in your leadership on the capital program.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering, as a follow-up, did the companies that you represent have to, I imagine they had to lay off workers or apply for PPP? Like, how did it play out?
I could start on that one if it's okay. So it really, I spoke with some of our members the last couple of days. It really, every situation is unique. Some of the things that affect the circumstance of an individual firm are its size. So ones that are smaller had the PPP available to them, which was a great government policy and program. There have been some issues about it still to this day in terms of forgiveness and all of these things. But then there are firms that did not have access to PPP. So that is one factor. Another one is the firm's portfolio. If it is a public clientele, including mayoral agencies, they were more vulnerable to the design pause. If they were private clientele, like buildings, it's a different story. But by and large, the impacts that we have borne have been furloughs, pay cuts, and that is, small to all the way up to the largest of firms. And that's been the reality. Furloughs, pay cuts, in some cases, people being let go. So that's what I would say on that. Speaking with an executive yesterday, it is a last resort to let someone go. There is a scarcity of design professionals in New York and in the whole country, really. And so when you have a quality person that you've invested in, because it's a licensed profession, this person has education credits, they gain experience in the New York City market, you really are loath to let them go. So it's really been a last resort.
Yeah, I've spoken with a few architects who said that their work just shifted to designing, medical centers or work stations, and that a lot of the private companies built like an energy center, like a medical workstation in the lobbies of their buildings, so that she felt anyway that work continued. It was a different type of work.
Unfortunately, that's not really the experience I've heard from most of our members. This is incredibly devastating for our members, as Bill said, from the smallest firms to the largest firms. City work is already something which few architects make a profit on, or few architecture firms make a profit on. It's usually done for the public good or to showcase to private sector clients. And so these were already projects where people weren't making money, and then now they're starting to dramatically lose, millions of dollars. And so unfortunately, there were a lot of layoffs. that have really devastated our industry. And we hope that these jobs are filled in the future, because the last thing we want is for people to go move to other cities where their city governments are more supportive of public works.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to agree with that last point that Adam made. That's so true. I mean, there really is a scarcity of design professionals, and we need to keep New York a home for them.
Yeah. Adam, if I could just follow up with you, you mentioned that the work stoppage could have an impact on helping the city comply with the requirements of the Climate Mobilization Act for its own buildings. Can you give us a few examples of that?
I don't know specific buildings, but it's widely believed that by at least the members I talked to who work for the city, that hundreds of city buildings will need to be retrofitted, and compliance is starting in only a few years for those worst performing buildings. So design and construction can take, I was actually just looking today at the Center for Urban Future, their report from a few years ago said the average city building takes 4 years from start to completion, though many, I think a third they said, go past 7 years. So if the city is looking for its worst performing buildings to comply, they should have started designing them last year. And they haven't, because there's been so far at least a year of work stopping.
Right. I'd like to actually follow up with you on that offline. Maybe if we could, sort of be a little more focused on that from your members and hear more stories. I'd be really interested in following up on that one specifically. My last question for everyone is, for the projects that you did continue to work on, were there any processes or procedures that were lifted during the pandemic that you would like to see continued, or that you thought were not good things that those processes, whether it be local law 63, whatever, that you would not like to see that go forward?
I think the most important was, and I alluded this in our testimony, was the institution of design build, not so much because of design build as a project delivery system, but because the state, in allowing design build, allowed the city for the first time to procure contractors with best value procurement, which means the city does not have to go with the cheapest contractor, which for many reasons is just an absolutely terrible idea, and is also one of the main reasons MWBEs don't work with the city. So that is something which going forward would require state approval, and hopefully does happen, because it would save the city countless dollars, and is long, for many decades, been known to be a huge problem with contracting with the city. So we hope that is something that is continued.
I would say, Chair, one change that has occurred, which has been actually good, a silver lining, has been the increasing reliance on the agencies on electronic processes for, as opposed to older, more cumbersome processes. Sort of fortunately and coincidentally, the city has been rolling out this passport system, which we are terrifically optimistic about. The biggest challenge for firms, from smallest to the largest, in serving the city clients, is the paperwork, the contract registration process, the payment process. It's essentially floating the city alone in some cases. When you do work and you pay someone to do work, and then takes months to receive payment, that's a real challenge. And so we're hopeful that all this movement to electronic processes can improve that. So that's been, I think it's accelerated that process. And we hope that good work continues.
I'm very familiar with Passport, having been the chair of the Committee on Contracts for my first term. So mainly, I know the rollout initially focused on the health and human services sector, but seeing now it come to the general contractor side of the ledger is really great to hear about it. I'd love to hear more about that, and where there are hiccups even in that, like as they roll it out to your sector? Are you able to use, the vaults, and are they rolling it out with the invoicing abilities that they are now starting to use on the social services side? It'd be great to hear more. Maybe we'll set up a meeting offline about that, but that's terrific to hear. All right. With that, should I turn it back to you, Noah?
There's nothing further at this time. I think you can just thank everyone and gavel out.
I would like to thank everyone for coming today. And again, thank the staff very, very much. And I'm going to gavel out now. Thank you.